Chapter 1: Contact Zones. Before there were borders, there were paths, rivers braided through open plains, valleys opened like doors, sheltered coasts pulled fish into waiting hands. Along these routes, two kinds of human moved as the seasons moved, returning, circling, learning the ground until it felt like memory. In the south and east lay the Levant's pale cliffs and pocketed limestone. To the north and west stretched the cold bent forests and long grasslands of Ice Age Europe. Between roughly 50 and 40,000 years ago, those paths brought Neanderthals and modern humans into the same places, sometimes the same caves, often the same hunts. Picture the first meeting you barely notice. A thin column of smoke on the horizon that is not yours. Footprints pressed into thawing mud, running parallel to your own. A child in one camp finds a flake of flint shaped by someone else's hand and brings it to her mother. The edges are sharp, but the angle and platform are unfamiliar. Whoever did this knows stone as well. There is nothing to fear in the object. There is everything to consider in the maker. The continent is not empty, it is patterned. Herds carve highways through valleys each spring. Salmon choke rivers like a calendar that returns on cue. In the cold months, people tuck into rock shelters where fires can smolder without suffocating them. In warm months, they follow animals, berries, and shellfish along familiar circuits. Contact happens because the logic of the land pushes everyone into the same choke points, the same fords, the same passes, the same caves that stay dry when storms turn the world to paste. Caves become timeshare homes across centuries. One winter, a Neanderthal group leaves a layer of ash, butchered bone, and heavy thrusting points pressed into the floor. A generation later, modern humans camp a few meters away and leave needles, slender blades, and beads cut from ivory. The layers stack like conversation. No signatures, but plenty of handwriting. Walk those floors today, and you can feel the rhythm. Arrive, warm up, eat, repair gear, tell stories, sleep, then move on, and someone else returns to do the same. The place remembers both. There is no single first handshake. There are dozens of small ones, some cautious, some tense, many unrecorded. A hunt line breaks over a ridge and freezes at the sight of silhouettes moving in the wind. A shared look says what words cannot. The reindeer bunch. The wind shifts. Time narrows. In a beat, the moment thins and snaps. One group turns left. The other waits, then follows at a distance, measuring, learning. Where did this happen? Start at the seams. The Levantine belt where Africa and Eurasia trade climates. The Balkans and the Danube corridor, Europe's central avenue. The Atlantic and Mediterranean coasts where shell middens rise like low hills. When did it happen? Often enough and long enough that it stopped being news to the people living through it. They adapted. They learned to read a trail and know whether the hands that cut those butcher marks were ours or the others, and whether that difference mattered today. Now picture a winter day. The snow is old and loud underfoot. A Neanderthal hunter, shoulders like a door frame, crouches behind juniper, heavy spear held low. He knows this valley. He has used it since childhood. Downwind, a small band of newcomers watches the same herd of horses. Their kit is lighter, throwing spears with detachable points and a simple lever that adds reach. The Neanderthals' plan is impact and control. The newcomers' plan is distance and angles. Both plans can work. Both require reading the same wind, the same animals, and now the same competitors. Some encounters end with retreat. Why pick a fight when winter already kills enough? Others turn into trade by gesture, a flake offered palm up, a nod toward a carcass to say share. There are also ugly moments, the kind that do not leave artifacts, only gaps. Contact zones are not utopias. They are places where practicality rules. If cooperation gets you through February, ethics become simple and local. Keep children warm, keep elders fed, keep promises that make survival more likely. In every contact zone, tools speak first. A new way to snap a long blade from a stone core. A stronger adhesive to fix a point to a shaft. A needle with an eye small and smooth enough to sew a seam the wind cannot find. None of these inventions care who thought of them. They reward whoever uses them. That is why ideas travel faster than people. When groups cycle back to the same caves in spring, they leave behind more than ash. They leave clues, fragments of technique lodged in someone else's memory, ready to be copied, improved, and passed on. Then there is space. Who gets to be where, when? A cave with a narrow entrance and a deep, dry chamber is real estate. So is a river bend, where fish stack after rain. So are the ridgelines, where you can see without being seen. Contact turns into choreography. Your band arrives 3 days after theirs leaves. Your trails skirt theirs by a valley. You start to expect the other fires on the far hill. Over years, this becomes pattern. Pattern becomes custom. We do not go there in midwinter. They do not cross this stream after the salmon run. Custom reduces risk. Custom is survival. Not every contact is face-to-face. Sometimes you arrive and find the story of the others written in what they left behind. A stack of horse bones cracked to get at the winter fat. A cache of raw blades tucked in a crevice for a return that never came. The soot of another family's nights blackening a ceiling beam you now sleep under. You clean the hearth, you patch the hide door, you add your ash to theirs. The dialogue continues even when the speakers never meet. Across these zones, the environment does not simply host the encounter, it pressures it. Temperatures drop a few brutal degrees. Storms shove herds onto new routes. A shelf of sea ice opens a shortcut along the coast 1 year and makes it lethal the next. People who survive are the ones who adjust fast, copy what works, and drop what does not, even when the idea comes from the hands of strangers. Flexibility becomes a form of courage. Borrowed knowledge becomes a kind of peace treaty with winter. Names do not matter to the weather, but they matter to us. We give labels to tool styles, Mysterian, Aurignacian, Gravettian, not because the people use those words, but because we see patterns in the stone. In contact zones, patterns blend. A point is made the old way, but hafted the new way. A bead that once marked one identity shows up at another camp. If culture is a river, then confluences are loud, messy, and creative. What looks like mixture is on the ground simply what works. It is tempting to tell this as a duel, as if two champions met on a plain and one triumphed. Real life is quieter and more complicated. Small bands of 20 to 50 people make decisions day by day. They cooperate when it saves effort. They avoid when it saves blood. They fight when the risk looks smaller than hunger. Above all, they learn to predict the neighbors without meeting them. How many they are this season. How bold. How desperate. How late in winter their stores must be running. Night shrinks the world to a circle of firelight. In one shelter, a Neanderthal woman turns a grindstone, thinning a point for tomorrow's hunt. In another, a modern human stitches a sealskin boot so tight it squeaks when she flexes it. The same wind probes both doors. The same fox watches both middens. On the rock walls, soot gathers in the same patterns. If the two groups pass each other in spring, they will recognize the smell of the other's smoke the way wolves recognize a rival pack. Part warning, part reassurance that the world is as it should be. There are moments when the distance collapses. A storm traps two bands in connected chambers of the same cave. Voices carry through stone like water through moss. At first they fall silent, listening. Then hunger becomes math. Someone hums to keep a child calm. Someone coughs. They wait it out, separated by a bend, aware of each other as fact rather than rumor. When the weather breaks, tracks diverge from the same mouth of stone in opposite directions. No blood spilled, no treaty signed, only knowledge gained. The others are real, close, and surviving. Over time, familiarity dulls the edge of fear. The sight of other footprints no longer means immediate danger. It means adjustment. You hunt earlier. You avoid the ford at dusk. You cache food deeper in the scree. You string a row of shells across a shelter entrance the way others do, a borrowed signal that says, occupied. When you move on, you tie a tuft of horsehair to a peg as a marker. Months later, you return and find a different knot added to the same peg. Someone understood the message and left their reply without a word. This is the stage on which everything else will happen: exchange, rivalry, intermarriage, and eventually absorption. But for now, the focus stays wide. Watch the flows of people along the Levantine corridor, up the spine of the Danube, across the open steppe, and along the damp edges of the Atlantic. Watch the way they pause at the same caves, circle the same herds, and occupy the same ridges at different hours of the same day. Watch the habit of presence harden into expectation. Shared world, shared knowledge, shared risk. And in that habitual closeness, something new becomes possible. A glance turns into a gesture. A gesture turns into a shared meal. A shared meal turns it into a promise that outlives winter. The story of what will be exchanged, tools, ideas, and eventually blood, begins here, on the paths that crossed so often they became the same path. When humans met Neanderthals, the meeting did not happen once. It happened again and again until contact felt ordinary. That ordinariness changed both peoples forever. Chapter 2. Exchange and the First Families. This is the chapter where contact stops being a headline and becomes a habit. The same trails that brought strangers to the same fords now carry ideas from camp to camp, clipped to belts and tucked into memory. A sharper blade here, a cleaner seam there, a gesture you can read across a windy valley. Survival is a ruthless editor. It keeps what works and throws out what doesn't. When two ways of being human share one landscape long enough, they start editing each other. Begin with the small revolutions of the hand. A napper strikes a core at a new angle, and a longer blade pops free. A hunter warms pine resin with charcoal and chews the mix so it sets hard, fixing a stone point to a shaft with less wobble. A woman threads sinew through the eye of a bone needle and pulls a seam tight until the garment whispers when bent. Each tweak is minor. The stack of them is life-saving. In storms, a sealed boot is worth more than a boast. In hunger months, a clean cut wastes less fat. Exchange rarely looks like a marketplace. It looks like watching. One band passes another's camp at dawn and studies a drying rack, the angle of poles, the spacing of cuts in the meat. Someone notes, someone copies, and a week later, the same trick appears 2 valleys away, as if the wind had taught it. People trade without words through the slow contagion of example. The layers archaeologists read show the pattern. Old ways persist, new ways spread, mixtures multiply. Not all knowledge travels for free. Some is paid for with risk. A young hunter spends a morning hovering near the edge of an unfamiliar group, inching close enough to watch them set an atlatl and loose a light spear with a hiss. He does not speak their words, but range needs no translation. Back home, he whittles, drills, lashes, fails, and tries again. When his own throw lands clean, the camp's winter changes by a few crucial meals. No treaty signed, only a copied motion grafted to an older style. Food is the center of every bargain. At a kill site, the best currency is meat and time. A nod decides whether 2 groups butcher side by side, whether tendons are shared, whether hides are split so both can patch gear before the storm. In lean years, cooperation buys February. In rich years, it buys peace. Sometimes the deal is silent. One group steps back from a herd they might have chased, leaving it to the other. Sometimes it is loud, sung in boasts after the hunt, confidence broadcast to warn off rivals. Children make the boldest crossings. To them, difference is a game before it is a border. A girl follows a pup between camps and returns with her hair braided a new way. A boy learns a word for wait, brings it home, and everyone finds it useful. Adults notice and begin borrowing on purpose. A marriage follows, then another. The first mixed families share chores, tell stories, grieve in winter, laugh in summer. Ordinary life laid across 2 lineages. The body keeps score in subtler ways. Over generations, small packets of genes move like songs. Some help with infections of cold, crowded winters. Some tune skin to different light. Some nudge sleep, so dawn feels kinder. None arrives labeled legacy. It arrives as a child who fights a fever better, a runner who goes farther before burning out, a mother whose milk returns after a hungry week. Exchange can be quiet and deep. Tools and bodies shape minds, and minds turn tools into symbols. Beads, pendants, pigment marks, carved bone, these travel too. A style of perforated teeth worn at the neck shows up on people who never hunted the animal. Red ochre smears the fingers in caves one group favors. Later, the same shade stains the other group's ornaments. Music crosses camps along with spouses and jokes, a reed whistle phrase that makes toddlers squeal spreads because toddlers are unstoppable promoters. Symbols stick to memory. Of course, exchange has rules, and the rules are local. Some things are shown freely, others guarded like a secret spring. A band will teach neighbors how to tan a hide faster, but keep a fish weir plan to themselves. Reputation becomes currency. Groups known to return favors get first look at innovations, or at least a warning when weather shifts or herds move. Groups known to steal get cold shoulders and colder camps. Trust and caution run on the same trail, often one step apart. Narrow the camera to a single evening. Smoke seeps from a hide flap. Elders teach young hands to twist plant fiber. Across the hearth, a visitor shows how to bevel a tiny ivory bead without splitting it. Laughter marks success. Outside, the wind fails at the seams. Inside, the baby sleeps. In a year, no one will remember who taught whom, only that the boots are warmer and the beads don't crack. In the morning, the visitor leaves with a gift and a promise to return after the thaw. He carries a one-hand knot, a joke, a word, and respect for the way these people fix a shaft. He leaves behind a better brace for the drying rack and a taste for garlic on marrow. Lineages braid like this: trivia and tools, borrowed tricks and shared meals, a weave made during ordinary work, not under banners. Conflict does not vanish, it is managed. A fight over a carcass can erupt even between people who swapped needles a season ago. Pride flares, spears rise, and someone remembers February, it lowers. Meat is cut in a pattern both sides can live with, and the future keeps its options open. Even raids, when they happen, are calculated. Hit stores, not children. Scatter, not slaughter. On a continent ruled by ice and distance, enemies you cannot erase make better neighbors than ghosts. By the end of this chapter in their lives, the border between ours and theirs has softened into something practical. You know who you are. You also know what you learned from the neighbors and what they learned from you. When winter narrows the math of survival, band names shrink and kinship expands. The first families of both worlds carry more than ornaments across the threshold. They carry futures that neither side could have made alone. What began as cautious watching has become routine collaboration, punctuated by rivalry and stitched by marriage. Ideas moved first, food moved next, people followed. And from those crossings came children who walk both trails, children whose voices, skills, and quiet inheritances announce a simple truth. In a land that demands everything, the smartest technology is each other. Chapter 3: Symbols, Art, and Identity. This chapter is about the things you cannot eat or wear, yet somehow keep you alive. Symbols do not warm ankles like fur boots or pierce ribs like a good point, but they hold groups together long enough for food and tools to matter. In the Ice Age, ideas were survival gear. Necklaces, pigments, songs, patterns of cuts and scars, all the small signals that say, you belong here, and the world means this. Begin with the handprint. A palm pressed to stone, pigment blown from a mouth, leaving a halo where a living hand once blocked the color. It is the simplest kind of authorship. I was here. We were here. In several caves, you can walk from chambers painted by one group to layers trampled by another, and see that the urge to mark endures across neighbors and years. The artists may not have known each other, but their gestures rhyme. Or take beads, teeth, shell, bone, ivory, stone, pierced, polished, strung, and worn. They are portable flags. A certain spacing or knot says, this band. Another pattern says, those cousins from the coast. When two groups meet, ornaments speak before voices do. The moment you do, the border shifts in your favor. Pigments turn bodies into moving canvases. Red ochre on cheeks, charcoal around the eyes, white ash in hair. Reasons layer, ritual, identity, glare protection, insect smoke, the joy of looking spectacular by torchlight. A mother streaks a child before a rite. Hunters mark each other to signal role and rank. Meanings travel with people, and sometimes without them. You find a smear in a style your band never used and know that neighbors passed through. Music threads through the camps like a second fire. Bone flutes, reed whistles, drum skin thumps on stretched hide. A melody is an invitation that crosses language. It teaches breath discipline to hunters, syncs steps on long walks, and keeps babies quiet while wind claws at the door. Ideas migrate because memory loves rhythm. Art is not a museum in this world. It is a toolkit for the mind. A painted bison is a memory palace for the herd's behavior, where the hump rises, where the muscles twitch before it turns. A carved mammoth with tiny incisions can be a calendar. A spiral of dots by a cave mouth might be directions to a water source. The aesthetic and the practical don't fight. They work shifts. Beauty makes information sticky enough to travel. Ritual welds the personal to the collective. In one valley, people bury their dead with beads and red powder, sending them into the ground as bright as dawn. In another, the dead lie on unornamented stone. The last gift, a careful alignment with the cave's light. A long, cold season teaches humility. No one knows the law of the sky. Everyone tries to greet it properly. When neighbors adopt parts of each other's rights, they are not betraying identity. They are reinforcing a shared grammar for grief and hope. There are marks on bodies as well as walls, scarification in repeating lines. A missing tooth removed deliberately, not by accident. Hair braided in scripts that can be read across a river. These are passports that can't be dropped. They declare loyalties and histories at a glance. They also change over time. A braid from one band becomes fashionable 2 valleys away. An old man's scar pattern returns on a grandson, mixed from both lineages. Even tools carry signatures beyond function. A point made in the old way, but hafted with a new adhesive, says, "We have been watching you." A sewing kit bundled with a painted tally mark says this was made by her. Ownership and authorship bloom in the same field as utility. When camps share space, the temptation to copy is constant. So is the desire to be recognized. The result is style, and style is information announcing who learned what from whom. Caves are classrooms, torchlight climbs, shadows for hands to play with, stone that sweats in storms and breathes in summer. People rehearse hunts on the walls, the arc of a spear, the swell of a flank, the motion that means now. Children learn to see by tracing lines older than their grandparents. They also learn to take turns, to keep secrets, to respect a sacred corner where only certain eyes may look. The ground is cold. The lessons are warm. Not every symbol comes in peace. A smear across a doorway might forbid entry. A row of shells tied across a path might warn that food is cached nearby and raiders will be hunted. Even the clean floor of a chamber is a sign. Someone cares, someone plans to return, someone watches. In a world with no locks, meaning is the first security system. Dogs become symbols too near the end of the Ice Age. A camp with dogs is a camp with ears and teeth and waking alarms. Collars studded with bone bits click a rhythm that says home before the fire is visible. Children name the pups as they would cousins. Graves begin to include them. You don't make art of dogs only for decoration. You do it to confess the truth. We are a pack enlarged. Identity hardens where it is challenged. 2 groups paint differently on purpose, or sing rival parts of the same song, or cut hair in dueling codes. Rivalry is still kinship. It keeps both sides alert and inventive. But identity softens too when life mixes bands through marriage and habit. Then art turns eclectic, a collage of practices nobody wants to abandon, because each means someone loved. If you could stand above the centuries and watch the symbols flow, you would see tides. A necklace style surges along a river, pauses at a mountain, spills through a pass. Ochre preferences drift like weather systems. New instruments spark in one region, and echo in another a generation later. The world is a loom, and the threads are singing. Why do any of these signs matter when the wind is trying to erase you? Because meaning gives stamina. People who know why they are together can endure boredom, hunger, and fear without breaking. A band with stories about its origins can accept newcomers without dissolving. Songs pace the steps to the next camp. A painted ceiling reminds the night that you have named it. Belief is not a luxury, it is fuel. In the end, symbols are bridges. They carry ideas where feet cannot go, and they let strangers start talking as if they had already met. In the contact zones, those bridges multiply until two histories begin to sound like one conversation. Art, music, ritual, ornament. These are the grammar of joining. They look like decoration. They act like glue. And so the two lineages, weather-hardened locals and relentless newcomers, do more than share territory. They share imagination. They borrow each other's beauty and end up with shared memory. When the ice loosens its fist and the world greens, the grandchildren of both sides will still wear the same songs and the same colors, and they will tell the same jokes into different fires. This is the quiet empire of symbols. No crown, no walls, and yet it conquers everything it touches. Chapter 4: Fate and Legacy. This is the part of the story people try to flatten into a single cause and a single day, as if one trumpet sounded and one people vanished. It did not happen like that. Fate is a rope braided from many strands, climate that tightens and slackens, numbers that rise and thin, strangers who become in-laws, accidents that look like plans in hindsight. For Neanderthals and the newcomers who shared their ground, the end of separation was not a cliff. It was a long slope made of winters, choices, and children. Begin with the cold, because the cold sets the rules. Ice does not only lower a thermometer, it redraws maps. Glaciers shove herds into bottlenecks. Floodplains harden into roads. Coasts turn into corridors and then drown again when the thaw returns. Groups that once had elbow room are squeezed into refugees, patches of forest and steppe where food still moves and water still glints under weak sun. Refuges concentrate both competition and opportunity. You find neighbors whether you want them or not, and you learn faster than pride prefers. In such places, any advantage, even a small one, grows teeth. Numbers matter in a way hearts do not like to admit. Neanderthal bands tended to be small and spread thin, with long histories in specific valleys. Newcomers arrived not as armies, but as networks, bands that could link and unlink across distance, passing news, mates, and methods along a chain of camps. A network can behave like a single, flexible organism. If one branch fails, others absorb the shock. If one camp learns a better way to hunt or a smarter seam for boots, the lesson travels. Over generations, that kind of connectedness multiplies survival odds in a world ruled by change. But connectedness is not conquest by itself. What truly changes a landscape is absorption. Once children begin to carry both histories in their bodies, counting them and us grows slippery. A winter with mixed families still looks like a winter. You must fish, stitch, butcher, plan. Yet the future has tilted. Skills recombine. Voices blend. People who once measured each other across a valley now share chores and kin. The result is a slow, quiet arithmetic. In each generation, more households can speak both languages of the land. In each generation, fewer live sealed in one way of being. Disease may also have nudged the balance, though it leaves fewer clean traces than stone. Small groups isolated by cold can be fragile to new infections. Larger networks can move recovery strategies around as easily as gossip. If you survive a wave of cough and fever because your sister's husband's camp knew a plant or a practice, you do not argue about identity. You thank them. Help owed becomes help given. The ledger of favors becomes a ligature between peoples. Climate lurches again. The cold tightens. The last glacial maximum gathers itself, and with it comes a harsher math. Fewer animals in predictable places. Longer hungry stretches. Migrations that miss old calendars. Camps that can pivot. Shifting diets, sharing coast and inland skills, toggling between ambush and pursuit hunts, last through bad runs more often than camps locked to one method. Adaptability is not a slogan. It is a pantry stocked with options. The more ideas you can reach, the more doors you can open when the wind turns mean. Some differences may have been about time, not talent. Neanderthals had a long, successful run in small, stable circles. Their knowledge was deep and local. The newcomers carried a culture that had already experienced many borders, many exchanges, many stitched-together solutions. In a gentle world, both strategies work. In a rough world, the strategy that assumes change is more likely to be ready for it. That readiness looks like better caching, wider marriage ties, quicker copying of good tricks, and fewer sacred cows in the toolkit. It does not require genius. It requires humility and speed. It is tempting to cast this as a duel of minds. That is a trap. The record is filled with Neanderthal competence, skilled stonework, controlled fire, sheltercraft, big game planning, care for injured kin, purposeful use of pigment, ornaments that catch light by design. It is also filled with the newcomer's speed at combining pieces, blade cores married to new hafting, fur sewn tighter with fine-eyed needles, weapon systems tuned for distance when prey demanded it. The difference that mattered most may not have been intelligence, but combination rate. How quickly parts learned from one context were tried in another. There were fights, there were raids and retreats and blood in snow. But violence does not explain the end by itself, because violence, too, tends to be local and brief. What endures is demography. A small population can survive being excellent. It cannot survive being excellent and unlucky for too many winters in a row. Add mixture to that, and even survival changes meaning. If your granddaughter carries your face but a neighbor's name, what outcome should the story count? By the time the ice loosens and forests spread back into old fields, the map of identity has blurred. In some regions, Neanderthal lineages have been folded into the newcomers so thoroughly that only biology will remember them. In others, the old camps are simply empty, their floors layered with ghost chores, ash, bone, broken points, the fine dust of ground ochre. Absorption and absence stand side by side like twin headstones, and both can be true in different valleys, even in neighboring caves. Now walk forward into us. The legacy of that long meeting is not only a tale to tell by firelight, it is a toolkit we still carry. In many of today's populations, tiny fragments of Neanderthal ancestry remain, small but busy. Some pieces tune parts of our immune system, whispering advice learned in Ice Age winters about how to meet a pathogen without burning the house down. Some affect skin and hair, the outer armor that negotiates with light, cold, and abrasion. Some nudge how we sleep and wake, as if advising clocks that still need to run in high latitudes and long nights. None of these fragments comes with a label that says gift or burden. They are options, switches evolution can click in or out as conditions demand. There is another legacy, less biological but no less real, the habit of learning from the unfamiliar. The contact zones trained our species to treat difference as a library. You can dislike a neighbor and still adopt their better brace for drying meat. You can distrust a rival and still copy their atlatl. The rule that emerged from centuries of shared wind was simple: steal the good ideas and pay for them with your own. That rule, hard, unromantic, generous when it can be, has driven human flourishing ever since. The story also leaves warnings. Small populations, even skilled ones, can be erased by the roll of dice. A bad run of winters, a collapsed herd, a sickness at the wrong time, a string of unlucky fights. Diversity in methods and mates is not a luxury, it is insurance. Networks are not only for celebration, they are life rafts. Identities that cannot flex may hold dignity for a time and then shatter. Identities that flex can braid others into themselves and end up larger than nostalgia allows. When you think extinction, adjust your lens. For Neanderthals, the end was not a single night. In many places, it looked like merging until counting them separately lost meaning. In others, it looked like silence after a long, competent residence. Both outcomes belong in the word legacy, because both feed the future. One by adding its pieces to us, the other by engraving in the ground that a way of life, however strong, can be outpaced by change. If you need a single sentence to carry away from this chapter, let it be this: what endures is what can be shared. Skills, blood, stories, ornaments, jokes, these are the parts of life that cross ridges and survive winters. Neanderthals and newcomers built a bridge under pressure, and we still walk it. When you raise your hand to shade your eyes, somewhere in the gesture is a memory of someone who did the same in a valley where ice shone and horses stamped, and the wind carried two different words for now. So close, the circle. The meeting was never just a confrontation. It was a long apprenticeship in both directions. It trained us to treat the world as negotiable, not fixed, to see rivals as future allies in part, to test methods against weather rather than pride, to make families that double as treaties. In the thaw that followed, the grandchildren of that era stepped into forests no one had seen in generations. They brought with them blades sharpened by many teachers, songs with two harmonies, and bodies that remembered more than one lineage at once. They also carried a lesson that still rescues us. On a planet that keeps changing its mind, the smartest technology is each other. And that is the fate and the legacy. Not a disappearance, but a diffusion. Not a vanishing act, but a handoff. Two kinds of humans shared a world until they shared a future. The bones that remain are quiet about feelings, but they speak clearly about outcomes. In their layered flaws and mixed children, you can read the closing of one chapter and the beginning of ours, written in ash, in winter breath, and in the stubborn will of different people to keep each other alive. If this journey gave you something new to think about, tap like. It tells me to make more stories like this. Drop a comment with the moment that hit you hardest, or the next world you want to explore. Mammoth Bone Cities, the first artists, or the Beringia Crossing. I read everything. And if you want more cinematic dives into the deep past, subscribe and turn on the bell so you don't miss the next documentary. Thanks for watching, for thinking, and for keeping these stories alive. Stay curious.